Long before the legendary Big Boys and Challengers raced over the mountains of the Wasatch Range, or the iconic pew-pew of the cab forward's exhausting air compressors echoed through the Sierra Nevada mountains, there was the Ocean Toads. In 1909 to 1910, the Harriman lines comprising of the Union Pacific, Southern Pacific, and the Oregon Railroad and Navigation took delivery of the first articulated locomotives on the system, the Class MC-1. Built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, these 2882s were only modestly successful in their intended roles. Around the same time, similar copies were produced for the Norfolk and Western, the Class Y1. These locomotives offered a number of dimensions and aesthetic differences. Their story is one of trial and error, early pioneers lighting the way for some of the most impressive feats of steam locomotive design. In operation, the MC-1 proved adequate enough, although it is not normally considered a successful locomotive design. The locomotives featured a unique Baldwin-designed two-section boiler. The rear half was a normal boiler, while the front half was a reheater that would reheat the steam before being used. This was a very early attempt at superheating, however it was not successful. The firebox was in similar size to the Harriman Common Standard 282. However, this was not enough to feed the voracious appetites of the mallets, and issues with too small grates and not enough heat plagued the coal-burning roads. The oil-burning MC-1s fared a bit better, as the fuel choice made the smaller fireboxes less of an issue. The Southern Pacific found the most use out of their copies, as the design spurred the many successful cab-forward types that would make up almost all of SP's articulated roster. As the story everyone knows so well goes, numerous snow sheds and tunnels on the Donner Pass proved to be the greatest challenge for SP. The crews would often suffocate, breathing in the smoke and toxic gases spewing out of the stack of locomotives. SP started providing crews with gas masks that could be worn in the tunnels to try and elevate the issue. This didn't entirely solve the problem, however, and eventually it was decided just to run the engines in reverse. The crews would be on the wrong side of the tracks now, but they wouldn't suffocate in the tunnels anymore. To solve this, Southern Pacific flipped the crew positions and put the tender on the rear of the locomotive, behind the smoke box. The legendary cab forwards were born. After the first Baldwin-built cab forwards arrived on the system, the MC-1s were transferred off Donner Pass and moved to Colton, where their assistance as helpers could not be overstated. During the road test of 1910s, the Southern Pacific calculated a 135% tonnage increase compared to the single 280. Two conventional MC-1s would eventually be converted into cab forwards, identical to their built brethren in the 1920s, and would go on to serve the SP for another 2 decades before both met the scrapper's torch in the early 1950s. The collective Union Pacific, Oregon Railroad and Navigation, later Oregon-Washington Railroad and Navigation, and the Oregon Short Line had more mixed opinions on the monstrous malaise. The Ocean Toads, as they were so aptly named, proved cumbersome beasts that, although were capable of moving great tonnage up steep grades, had difficulty steaming due to the lower quality of coal the two railroads burned. As opposed to the Southern Pacific, which burned oil, draft boxes and smokestack extensions would be installed to try and help improve the draft and increase the temperature of the firebox. This helped to some degree. OWR&N would later follow the SP and convert its 3800 series malaise to oil. The Union Pacific found the 2882s to be highly capable of the work they were designed to do, when they weren't leaking steam. The articulated joints constantly leaked steam, so badly that it led to a collision with a stopped train on one MC-1 during a snowstorm. Perhaps the best compliment from the crew is that the MC-1s outclassed any other locomotive on the road in strength. On one particular engine, the unique poem was chalked into the tender, a nod to the incredible strength for the time. It read as follows: "I was built for a battleship, but they had no place for guns, so they put me on Sherman Hill to pull 10,000 tons." The UP eventually sent its MC-1s to the OWR&N, becoming their 3600 series malaise. The 3600s would be transferred once again to the OSL and become their 3700 series. They would finish out their days in helper service on the OSL before being scrapped in 1928. The OWR&N malaise would end up in similar service. As the 3800 series, they would gain a 6,000-gallon auxiliary tenders from retired pre-1900 280 types. Going down in history as being difficult to fire, unreliable, and above all, incredibly slow, the MC-1 is overshadowed by the much more famous and successful designs it spurred. Despite its shortcomings, the historical significance of the MC-1 cannot be overstated. It was this class that, due to the suffocation of the crews in the tunnels and snow sheds of Donner Pass, forced the Southern Pacific to adopt the cab-forward design. The slow speed of the MC-1 led the Union Pacific to combine the great strength of the locomotive with high speed, leading to the iconic Big Boy and Challenger types. Lastly, on the Norfolk and Western, their experience with the Y1 and its competitor, the X1, led to the eventual development of the Y6B, the pinnacle of drag power. For all of their faults, though, the MC-1s paved the way for the improved designs to come, and are remembered most for highlighting the chances needed in order to keep the goods moving on some of the country's toughest ever stretches of railroad.